The Raptors took on the Magic on national TV in the States and fell flat on their faces. Let's talk about it.
This is the Raptors Postcast, your instant game reaction for the Toronto Raptors. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this episode of the Raptors Postcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports network covering your team every day. And we're coming to you live after the Raptors 130-120 loss to the Orlando Magic on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Locked On Podcast feed. I'm Zulfi, Sheikh, credentialed journalist covering the Raptors and the NBA for over 2 years now with outlets like Sportsnet and Raptors Public. And now I'm one of your humble hosts of the Raptors Postcast, breaking down each and every game with you. And with me is Duane Notice, a.k.a. Dino, professional basketball player and analyst. Duane has represented Canada. He's been part of the Raptors system with the 905, and he's still hooping professionally in leagues like the CEBL. And on tonight's show, we're going to talk about how the Raptors turned another would-be win into a loss when they got punked late. We'll break Magic's hot shooting night and why that killed the Raptors. Get some thoughts from our resident pro in a segment we like to call Take Notice, and then we'll wrap things up by handing out our player of the game. And Duane, this feels like a bit of deja vu to the Knicks game just a couple days ago on Wednesday. The Raptors were able to do a lot of really good things for a lot of this game, take a lead late, this time even better than last game where they blew it in the third. They took a lead into the fourth. They were up by 14 at one point heading into that quarter. And then everything just got away from them again in similar fashion, I would say. They got punched by the Magic. You said it a bit earlier to me where the refs kind of let them play. And the Raptors just didn't have a response.
Yeah, they didn't have a response to that physicality. The refs did let them play, especially in the second half. But for me, it's becoming a continued storyline with the Raptors. As a guy who's a cinephile and I love movies, nothing bothers me more. It's my biggest pet peeve when I'm watching a film, an hour and 30 is great, it's solid, and in the last 30 minutes, they can't land the plane, and they're unable to figure out the climax or figure out how to complete the story. And that's what's been going on with the Raptors, these late game just collapses when it comes to them being in control. The third quarter, they exploded, but in the fourth, they let their guard down. And to me, it felt like some hangover from what happened when they played the Knicks at home. A little bit of rust, man, not really having attention to details when it comes to the scouting report. We saw them open the game, jumping at a Suggs pump fake, a guy that shoots in the low 30s in the three-point line. Why would you do that? Giving them straight lines to the basket. But in the second quarter, they found their rhythm, and I liked how Darko called that early timeout, and it kind of felt like the Raptors came on 11-2 run after that. But outside of that, it's been tough just putting together a complete basketball game, and that's going to be something the Raptors have to do going forward outside of the obvious, which is making shots from the outside and just continuing to bow down or bear down on defense and stay in front of their man.
Yeah, we'll talk a bit more about the three-point shooting in a sec, but I think the thing that frustrated me most about this, and this was a little different than the than the Knicks game, was like the Raptors really did find a recipe for success in this game that you knew was going to be a rock fight. These are two top half of the league defenses. Granted, they're both bottom half of the league offenses, so you know it was going to be a bit of a tight game. The last three times these teams have played, the games have ended by combined margin of 4 points, and they've been decided by single digits. So obviously this was going to be a close game where they were going to scrap it out in the end. You had to expect that. But again, the Raptors early on were finding solutions to a lot of this, and I think the thing that really worked for them was they were pushing the pace like crazy. Whether it was off makes or misses, that's something you didn't see against the Knicks physicality. It was trying to make sure you didn't have to play against a tilted defense. I think even early in the fourth, the Magic tried going into a zone, but the Raptors just got the ball down the floor the very next possession really quickly, and they were able to face an unset defense instead. And that's a lot of what the Raptors were able to do in this game. Like if you win the fast break battle 25-15, you win the points in the paint battle 56-42, you think it's a really good night for the Raptors. And again, for three quarters it was. But that fourth quarter, if you get outscored 44-21 and you make 5 shots to the Magic's 13, there's just not many games where you're going to be able to manage in scenarios like that. And I think a lot of it was that the Raptors kind of just didn't find any of that success they had playing fast, getting up-tempo looks at the rim in the fourth quarter. And I guess the question to you is like, is that just like the Magic finding a groove defensively, or like how did all of that get away from them so fast?
Honestly, I think it has to go back to the physicality. I think the physical play of the defensive and when it comes to the Magic really bothered the Raptors, and it really slowed them down from running those fast breaks and having those transition success that we saw throughout the game. Like you mentioned, 25 fast break points. It's so weird, right? It's one of those games where if you look at the box score, you didn't watch the game, you'd assume the Raptors would have won. They almost dominated or won in every category when it comes to rebounds, when it comes to the team assists, when it comes to all those things. So it's just a weird thing where they just were unable to grind it out at the end. And I think it just had to do with the physicality. The Raptors were complaining about a lot of calls, and I think that was getting to them. You would usually see the Raptors huddle, stay more connected, stay together, but it seems that the foul trouble was getting into their heads early on throughout the game. We saw in the beginning how many times they were unable to stop the Magic from getting to the line. I think the Magic went to the line and scored 9 free throws in the first quarter alone. So it was kind of hard for the Raptors to find their groove defensively when it came to this game, because I didn't think they were able to establish themselves like the Magic were, and the Magic were more resilient at the end of the day, and that's why they got the W.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think Jack Armstrong put it really well on the broadcast, where he said for 2 nights in a row, the Raptors let themselves get punched in the mouth and they didn't really do anything about it. From your perspective as a player, like when you see a team reeling like that, and again, they were able to do stuff early, they're able to find success, and you see they're struggling kind of to close the game. What exactly are you looking for from a team to figure it out or try to, like, I guess, counter when they're reeling late in a game?
Yeah, I think teams just got to try and stay together. When, as a player, you can kind of get out of your body, get out of your system, especially playing on the road, right? When other teams go on runs, but you have to kind of try and find that poise, that connectivity. And I think that's what the Raptors got to do. They got to call their own huddles. They got to get on the same page, and they got to get back to just slowing things down when things get too pressurized for them when they're in these situations. So if I'm the Raptors going forward, again, watching film, but understanding that we have an identity that we've established, especially on the road recently, we have to just get back to that. And I think they'll be all right. They can't panic, but it is something to think about right now with how they're dropping these quarters and not being able to close on a high note, because it's affecting them in the long run. So again, the Raptors just got to continue to find themselves like they have been on the road, and I think they'll be all right.
Yeah, and I think it's something that you're going to see a lot more of. You saw it with the zone defense, right? Like once teams kind of started understanding the Raptors didn't necessarily have an answer for it right away, or they didn't know how to deal with it, it started coming up more and more. And this is 2 games in a row now where like teams are like, if we get scrappy with the Raptors, we get in their face, we apply some more ball pressure. Maybe they're not all that comfortable with it. Maybe they're not sure how they want to deal with it. Guys that I think do. I think Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram did really good things in this game, especially weathering storms early. But those guys aren't going to be on the floor all the time. Maybe you try to stagger your lineups if you're Darko to keep one of them on the floor all the time. But in a game like tonight, Brandon Ingram had some foul trouble early in this game. He had to sit towards the end of the first half because of his 3 fouls, right? So when you have situations like that, it's how are you going to get the other guys to, I guess, face these situations, because not every night is Scotty Barnes or Brandon Ingram going to be able to solve everything for you. And they damn sure did try tonight, but the minutes where they were off the floor were brutal for the Raptors. Like in a game where Scotty Barnes at one point was plus 24 and finishes plus 6, you lose by 10 points. Why? Because when he wasn't on the floor and when other guys had to make decisions, it didn't necessarily go all that well.
It didn't. And you see the value of Scotty Barnes who's on the floor, right? He's such a two-way asset in the sense that we could see him block a shot on one end and then still get an and one in the same breath. That is so special. Not a lot of players can do that. Not a lot of players can play with that motor. So you're right. Someone has to step up and plug in that energy when Scotty Barnes is not on the court, because he can't do it all. As much as we want him to and think he's capable of doing that, he can't do it all. So again, someone else has to step up. I thought it was a very weird game, right? Grady Dick only played, I think, 8 minutes or if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. After finding a groove the past couple weeks. So as a player, you just got to stay ready, stay trusting in your game and stay working on your game and stay ready for the moment. But Jacoby Walter had some great minutes off the bench. We saw his defensive pressure and then him just making open shots, but then also just getting out in transition and being a part of the assist count being so high. But I think the Raptors just got to find that next man up mentality, need a little bit more from Sheikh, quickly try to do his thing. Mamo needs to get back into the rhythm of things. I think it's been a little bit out of rhythm since CMB returned back into playing, but CMB playing at a high level, his hustle plays. We see him be a little bit undersized, but at the same time, he makes up for it with heart. But you talked about the zone a little bit, and I wanted to get back to it. I think that the Magic did an interesting thing with the zone where it's like they started in zone, but then when the shot clock got to around 10 seconds, they went to man. And sometimes that messed with the Raptors scheme a little bit. And so, again, they're not going to be seeing the same type of zone look every night. So they're going to have to start preparing or have to try and prepare and expect to have these teams play zones against them in different ways and different formats so that they can be successful and figure out ways how to, coincide with what's happening on that end, because Raptors are struggling when it comes to other teams playing zone against them.
Yeah, that's a good point, Duane. And another area the Raptors are struggling is 3-point shooting, and it's time we get to our turning point so we can talk about it.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
I'm sure as a player, and I can appreciate this as well, that like sometimes it feels reductive to say that like, oh, the other team just made more shots than you, that's why they won. And I don't think that's necessarily why the Magic were able to pull out this victory, but it's hard to ignore the fact that one of the few teams in this league that is actually technically a worse three-point shooting team than the Raptors by percentage and makes had a night like they did tonight where they hit 17 of 34 from downtown. Specifically in that fourth quarter, the Magic went 6 of 8 from deep, and the Raptors in return went 2 of 9 from deep. There's just math there that's not going to be on your side, and it's become a continued concern for the Raptors. If we're talking about the physicality being a thing that's not been great for them, it's also been the outside shooting, which is like, I know they don't have like an insane amount of depth when it comes to three-point shooting, but when you look at up and down the lineup, you look at guys and you think they can shoot the ball. Like Brandon Ingram goes 4 of 8 from this game, which is great, but then RJ Barrett 0 of 5, Emmanuel quickly 2 of 6. Mamu, who had a bit of a hot stretch, he goes 0 of 3. Grady Dick only attempts one and he misses it. Like, I don't think they can necessarily solve this 3-point deficit just by making more threes. I think we've learned that, but how do they go about just trying to, I don't know, generate more looks or find different ways to solve this problem? Because it really buried them at the end of this game here when the Magic caught fire from deep and they had no response.
Yeah, it comes out to confidence at the end of the day. Continue to trust the work because, yes, they're executing the drive, kick, swing, and getting open opportunities. They have to capitalize. There's not much more you can ask for. In today's modern era of basketball, you're going to have to hit the 3-ball at a high level because there's such a high volume and so many teams that utilize three-pointer as a weapon. So, again, if the Magic are going to make 10 more threes than you do, simple math, it's going to be hard for you to win the game. So with the Raptors, yes, Brandon Ingram went 4 for 6, and he did his thing. You saw a guy like RJ be aggressive shooting those threes. And as a player, it's kind of that gray area of, yes, I know I'm capable of making threes. I think he shoots in the mid-30s, so we know he could hit that shot. But at the same time, Jack made a great point during the game where sometimes teams are allowing you to be open for a reason. So right. Raptors have to try and find that synergy, find guys that can step in and shoot these shots at a high level, or try and get a player like I remember back in the day, again, true Raptors fan. I love Jason Capono, guys like Daniel Marshall, guys like Del Curry, just real snipers that keep the defense honest. I think the Raptors don't have enough of that. Like you mentioned, Grady Dick, who shoots the ball at a high level. A guy like Brandon Ingram is more of a scorer to me. Quickly is more of a scorer to me. They're not like knockdown, dead-eyed three-point shooters. If the Raptors are able to get one more three-point shooter, I know that, three-point shooting is hard to find because, sometimes you give up on the defensive end, but they're able to get one more flamethrower. I promise you things will start opening up for the Raptors because then guys like Scotty will be able to be more efficient in his little few threes that he takes. Guys like Quickly and Shed will be able to get their efficiency up as well. So I just think that to solve the problem, it's not going to take one guy, but having another guy out there who could hit a shot at a high level, I think is going to do wonders for the Raptors because it's going to keep these teams honest, and they're not going to be able to keep playing these zones against them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like, obviously, adding more shot-making talent is going to make a difference. But until then, I think another side of it is that defensively, what can you do against a hot three-point shooting team? And I think for the Raptors, like, if you look at the Magic, they shoot 12 of 23 above the break. That, again, a part of it is just, like, guys are having hot nights. When Desmond Bane is hitting the type of threes he does, when a guy like Jalen Suggs, who's, like, a 30%, maybe even lower than that three-point shooter, that's okay. But you mentioned this a lot, Duane. Sometimes it's understanding the scout. And the Magic from the corners are a top 10 three-point shooting team. So there's one area where they have a decent chance to make threes. And in this game, they make 5 of 11. They get more open looks there than you probably want. And that's one of those things where, again, defensively, like, where can you shut off the taps, right? Like, you may not be able to do it all over the floor against a hot shooting team, but, like, make it easier on yourselves. And the Raptors didn't necessarily get down the defensive end tonight. And I think part of that let the Magic catch a bit of fire. In that fourth quarter, I think, aside from the fact that the Raptors got outscored 44 to like 21, there was like a 7-0 run in there. And that was based off 2 corner threes by Suggs. And then I think the other one was by Bane as well. So letting those guys get hot, you saw the avalanche that came from it. And again, if you're not going to make the shots on one end, you have to do everything you can to stop them on the other end. And defensively, I felt like the Raptors missed some opportunities there.
Yeah, you made great points just about paying attention to the scout. The Magic are so efficient when it comes to the corner trade balls. So, again, the Raptors, I felt like were over-rotating and leaving out that corner drift too many times. Or there were some plays where I felt like, Paolo going to the basket was being double-teamed from behind, and it was unnecessary. I felt like he didn't have a scoring position, and yet he kicked it out, and it was a drive-kick situation for the Magic. So, again, I think the Raptors just a little bit behind the step when it comes to closeouts and just paying attention to the shooters out there. But again, at the end of the day, if Suggs is going to start hitting shots like that, if Baines is going to start hitting shots from the logo, back-to-back trade balls, there's nothing much you can do. It's the NBA. Guys are highly skilled, and when they feel good, they're going to start playing better. So the Raptors have to figure out a way to shut that water off a little bit earlier, especially in the fourth quarter, because when guys get their rhythm, and like you said, simple math, if I'm not making shots on the offensive end, but I'm also giving up points on the defensive end, how am I going to win this basketball game? So at the end of the day, it comes down to simple mathematics. You got to make your shots, and you got to stop the other team from making their shots as well.
Yeah, very well said, Duane. All right, we are going to dive into the return of Darko-ball and how the Raptors were able to get some good looks out of it until they weren't able to late. And then we're going to hand out our player of the game as we continue this episode of the Raptors Postcast. All right, this episode is brought to you by Gametime. During basketball season, there's nothing like being in the building. The energy, the crowd, the first big run that gets everyone on their feet. I know tonight in Orlando, once the Magic started making that comeback, the crowd was rocking. I could hear it through the TV. Fans want to be there for those moments, not stuck refreshing screens or guessing what tickets are really going to cost. Now, that's where the Gametime app comes in. The Gametime app gives fans the advantage back and makes it incredibly easy to score amazing tickets. It's fast, simple, and without guesswork. Browsing the app is straightforward and intuitive. You can see the view from your seat before buying, which makes it easy to choose tickets, and prices include the fees up front, so everything is clear right away. So whether it's a game or another live event, everything is right there in one place. And for fans of the Raptors, they're about to start a 5-game homestand at Scotiabank Arena. So it's a good time to check out the app and see what deals you can find. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for 20% off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. Now, this episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Fridays always feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making it even better. Every Friday night before games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. So Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing because of NBA Happy Hour. And it's because the timing is perfect. It's right before the games and right before the weekend starts. And you can find boosts, bonuses, and surprises when you open the FanDuel app at that time. It adds extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. And on a night like tonight, with a 9-game slate of hoops to get through, the simpler, the better, I say. And FanDuel does that. So before tip-off, check out the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour, NBA Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, as we continue this episode of the Raptors Postcast, be sure to check out Sean Woodley with Locked On Raptors. He'll probably have more in-depth analysis of this loss and what the Raptors are looking like heading into the trade deadline after the weekend. But Duane, it's time we head over to our Take Notice segment where you, our resident pros, gives you some of your observations from this game. What did you see tonight, Duane?
Today's Take Notice segment is Give and You Shall Receive. And the Raptors were very unselfish in sharing the rock tonight. They were dropping dimes left, right, and center. They had 32 team assists, and this was vital for the team's success on a night where, again, they struggled from the three-point line. But the Raptors were elite when it comes to just movement without the basketball. If I had my own kids, which I'm not a father yet, but if I had my own kids, I would say, listen, watch the Darko style of basketball. Sharing is caring for sure. And I love the way they play with great pace, man. 25 fast break points. They took advantage of face cuts. Like I said, movement without the basketball is very good because it generates offense in situations for them where it's tough moments and they're unable to find, that consistent rhythm on the offensive side of things, but also when they can't get those stops. So again, them doing the face cuts, the give and goes, which is so traditional, them making great plays out of the short roll, sometimes too unselfish. We saw CMB have a couple opportunities to finish under the basket, but instead he opted out for kickouts. We'd love to see him go up with that, but it's just a testament to the Raptors trusting each other and sharing the basketball. And especially in the third quarter where we saw them explode for over 40 points in that quarter alone. But it's just unfortunate they weren't able to beat the opponent tonight. But, it's hard to win a game when the other team is making 10 more threes than you are. But again, establishing themselves in the paint, I thought the Raptors did a great job of pushing the pace and sharing the basketball. If they had to take anything away from this game, I think they need to continue to do that because a lot of guys are able to cook when you can have that be the case. A lot of guys are able to have the ball and get in rhythm, and we don't have that stagnant style of offense where, Scotty Barnes has to build them out or Brandon Ingram has to build them out on an island. When they move the ball and play with pace, the Raptors are getting the ball into the basket despite not shooting the ball from the three-point line at a high level.
Yeah, I think that last part there was the most important part of them returning to this style of offense, right? Obviously, it's unfortunate that they didn't come in a win, but if you look at how the Raptors collapsed against the Knicks, it was, to your point, a lot of over reliance on a guy like Brandon Ingram, who was one of the only guys who found some success in that third quarter against the Knicks. It was like, hey, can you take the ball late into the shot clock and figure something out for us? And in this game, especially towards that first half and most of the third quarter, it was, we're going to trust the pass. We're going to find ourselves in different spots by relocating, being active. And again, pushing the pace, whether it was off makes or misses, so we didn't have to play against a set defense. And the Raptors in this game, you mentioned the final assist total with 32 on 44 made shots. They had 21 assists at halftime. They had all of 20 assists against the Knicks in the entire game. So just show how much more talented they can be in terms of moving the ball and how much more potential they can kind of, I guess, enact there in terms of moving the ball. For them to have 21 assists and 18 fast break points in one half against the Magic versus less than that against the Knicks, I think it spoke to them problem solving. It spoke to them realizing that this over reliance on their star players isn't necessarily the most positive thing all the time. And it's tough that I didn't come in the win, but you saw them solve at least one problem along the way, at least for one night. And you hope that you can see it continue for an extended period, because there was portions of this game where you saw the way the Raptors were passing and it was leaving you a little like awestruck. It was awesome. There was a play, I believe, in the third quarter where all five players touched the basketball. It was Emmanuel quickly, Scotty Barnes, like mid screen and roll, gets it to RJ, who dumps off the CMB, a paint to paint pass to Scotty, who then swings it out to Ingram for that three. If you go back to the end of the second quarter, again, this is talking about pace and playing to their style offensively. The clock's winding down. What does Scotty do? He rips the rebound, and then he turns into, I'll say, prime Joe Flacco, because he's a Ravens fan, throws it all the way down to the other end, and heads up to Jacoby Walter, knowing the time and hustling down to get there. He gets the ball, scoops it up, and gets a basket right before the end of the half. That's a momentum raiser for you as well. So there was all these little pockets of moments where the Raptors, you saw the offense and what they're capable of when they're moving. It's just, again, we have to go back to the fact that, like, you have to sustain that for the full 48 minutes.
Yeah, it's tough, man. You got to be able to share the ball at a high level consistently. But I want to speak towards the other teams playing defense physical against the Raptors. The Raptors, in order to beat the pressure, I've always learned as a basketball player, is to cut back door. If a player is going to guard you at the half court line, to relieve the pressure, you get rid of the basketball and you want to make a lot of face cuts. So for the Raptors, that is them playing to their advantage, is getting downhill, is using the pressure that these teams are putting up against them and using it to their advantage. So if they can continue to do that, I think they'll play at a high level. But you mentioned it, just being able to have a guy like Scotty get a rebound, look like the prime Kevin Love out there who used to make those full-court outlet trespasses, and then a heads-up play from Jacoby Walter, who, like I said, had an outstanding game. And it's always a great sight to see when you see a guy coming off the bench and impacting the game like the way he did. And his growth is just a great sight to continue to see on both levels of the basketball. But, yeah, the Raptors have to continue to try and get stops, but also just take advantage of passing the ball and making these shots, because they're generating open looks, but they just got to knock them down.
Yeah, definitely knock down some more shots. And hopefully we see that as they continue to grow through this season and into the All-Star break. All right, Duane, it is time for us to hand out our player of the game.
This is the Locked On Player of the Game.
All right, this one's an interesting one, and I feel like I had so many thoughts and notes about why this was going to be a co-player of the game for Scotty and BI when we thought they were going to win this game. And I guess we could still go that way, but just to show some other guys some love, I know you mentioned Jacoby Walter, 13 points, 5 of 6 shooting. I thought his activity overall was great. I believe in the first half, he had 11 of those points and was the only player off the bench to score, so not the best night for the second unit. But ultimately, I look at a guy like Scotty Barnes, who had 19 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists, 4 steals on 7 of 14 shooting, and his overall impact finishes him a +6 in a 10-point loss. So I'm going to lean Scotty Barnes, that I think would be the player of the game, just because of his impact on both ends of the floor. I know you mentioned it earlier, like you could probably say like 6 times in this game where, oh, look, Scotty gets a stop in one end, and there he is off the other way, making a play and scoring a basket at a very timely point for the Raptors. But I also don't want to dismiss the fact that, hey, Brandon Ingram, 35 points, 13 of 23. He was getting buckets. Again, timely as ever, like I like to mention. And then he finishes with over 20 points for the 5th time in his last 6 games. So Scotty, BI, I'm torn. Like, where are you going?
Man, that's tough. I like the co-player of the game, man. I think they both brought it tonight. If you look at Scotty, man, he's such a disruptor on the defensive end. How many times, I know the Raptors, because I remember playing from 905, and they statted this, but they stat deflections. How many times does Scotty do a great job of getting his hand on the basketball? Even if it doesn't result in a steal or it results in a turnover, he's still able to disrupt the offense, knock off some time on that shot clock, and put the opposing team in so much trouble. And then how many blocks did he get? Just he might get beat to the basket, but the willingness to not give up on the play and to still recover with his length and his athleticism, erase the shots off the backboard and start his own outlet pass for his own semi-fast break, I think is just tremendous. But you talk about BI, not only his timely buckets, but his playmaking ability. We spoke about the team assists. We didn't talk about BI getting into the paint, making that 360 pass to the dunker spot. I thought that was a very sweet, nifty pass down the lane. But yeah, BI doing his thing at all levels, scoring it from the 3-ball line, but also getting to the midi, getting to the line, and also opening up the game with a nice highlight dunk going baseline, which I thought was pretty great to see him be engaged and going to the basket and showing that he's not settling. But I would give it to both those guys. Their efforts were tremendous tonight. It was just unfortunate that the supporting cast couldn't kind of help them get the dub. But going forward, if Scotty's continuing to, stuff the stat sheet at this high of a level, I think the Raptors will always have a chance to win basketball games. And that's all you can ask for. When you play on the road, you want to be able to stay in games. And the fact that they were able to stay in games until the end, I think is something to be positive and optimistic about. But at the same time, they're still going to have to get it done. Someone made a great point. It was a national TV game, so it kind of feels like an audition, right? For the rest of the world, for the rest of America, North America, around the world, everybody to see the Raptors play at a high level. We saw, Brandon Ingram scored 35 points. If he's not an all-star, I don't know what's going on. And also Scotty Barnes showing it on both ends tonight at a high level. If he's not an all-star, then we definitely got a riot in the streets. But shout out to both those guys being the two-headed monster, the snake for the Raptors tonight on the offensive end.
Yeah, look, it's our show. We make the rules. So co-player of the game for Scotty and BI. And look, again, to your point and to the comment that we just highlighted, this was a bit of an audition. I know reserves come out Sunday, so those votes are probably in from coaches, but for teams around the league, for fans watching around the league, like, this is how you get recognition. This is how they see that Scotty Barnes is deserving to be a defensive player of the year. And truthfully, it would have meant a lot more if it ended up coming in a win. But at the end of the day, like, these two did their jobs as leaders of this team. In the second quarter, I believe the Magic were on like an 8-0 run. And then when Scotty checked back into the game, that's when Scotty and BI pushed the pace, got guys running. And what do? They finished the quarter on a 19-6 run or a 21-5 run it was at the time. And then they did the same thing in the third quarter when it was like an 8-0 run for the Magic. And they come back from what was a tie game to end up taking a double-digit lead into the fourth quarter. That's because of what Scotty Barnes was able to do, muscle his way to the basket a couple of times, BI with his tough shot making. So your leaders did their job. Unfortunately, again, didn't get a lot of extra help down the stretch. But when you were up double digits going in the fourth quarter, you just have to find a win and a point blank, and the Raptors didn't tonight. So before we wrap things up, Duane, just any final thoughts? Second loss in a row for the Raptors. They're now heading back home for an extended homestand, which hopefully will be kind to them, even though they've technically been better on the road than at home, which will be interesting. But final thoughts on this loss before you wrap it up?
I think two things. One, can't be discouraged. I know I keep saying that, but one of my mentalities, especially as a shooter, when I'm in the gym, I don't want to ever miss 3 in a row. So again, they lost twice in a row. Don't want to let it compound into 3 in a row. Got to have that mindset going forward that if we get hit in the mouth, we have to be resilient. We have to be able to come back to the park, put our guard up, and defend ourselves. So the Raptors going forward have to understand, yes, it's a game of runs, but they can't let those runs be diminishing fatigues for them throughout the game. That's the first thing. And I think the second thing is, man, just playing with more heart, playing with more energy, and just getting back to playing together and having fun out there. I saw some complaining. I want to see them continue to play at a high level. So if they're able to do that, I think that they'll play a little bit better going forward. Just valuing the basketball too. We didn't talk about the turnovers tonight. I know, at the end of the day, the NBA, like you said, the Magic is a great defensive team, but just I felt like there were some uncharacteristic turnovers from the Raptors, sometimes unforced errors. And if you clean those up, then that is a way to kind of, minimize those mistakes going forward, especially playing on the road when those rims aren't going to be kind to you or the referees or the fans or the opposing team. So again, if they're able to protect the ball a little bit better and value possessions going forward, I think that they'll have a better chance at winning basketball games at the end of the day.
Absolutely. That's going to be what they need to do and to turn things around. And we'll see if they get it done. But for now, that does it for us. For myself, Zulfi, Sheikh, and Duane Notice, thank you to everyone who tuned in live and for those listening the morning after. And if you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe to Locked On Raptors on all platforms. And don't forget to comment below if you have any thoughts. But we will be back on Sunday live after the Raptors host the Utah Jazz. Again, the first of 5 straight home games. So we will see you then, breaking it all down on the Raptors postcast. Peace.